Hello, welcome. Today we're going to talk about fairness for Black, Latinx, and female entrepreneurs. We're all very aware of the disparity in the funding among these three groups. And so we want to talk to some key experts in the area and who are really working to make a difference. Next to me, I have Candice Matthews. She's the CEO and founder of Lightship Capital, among other things. Then I have James Norman, who's the founder of Pilotly and Black Ops. And lastly, I have Neda Amidi, who's the president of Plug and Play Tech Center. First of all, I'm going to have each one of them introduce themselves and then talk a little bit about what they're doing in the space. My name is Thaman. I lead communications for P&G Ventures. Procter Gamble Ventures is a startup studio within Procter Gamble that is working to create new brands and businesses where we currently do not serve the consumer today. So first I'm going to start with Candice. Candice, welcome.
Awesome, thank you. So Candice Matthews. I am the founder and CEO of Lightship Foundation. We support women and minorities in tech and innovation. So we support remarkable founders who identify as women, who are from the Black community, Indigenous communities, people of color, those who are from the LGBTQ community and people with disabilities. So pretty much all Americans. Mm-hmm. I started that foundation back in 2017 in Cincinnati, Ohio, so close to our friends at Procter Gamble. And we are hitting our 5th year here in July. We run programming in Cincinnati, Ohio, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Detroit, Michigan. I wear a second hat where I am a general partner at Lightship Capital. It's a $50 million fund that invests in those groups.
Cool. I'm James Norman, currently located in Oakland, California. I'm the CEO of Pilotly, the first market research platform built for creative content. I'm the founding partner of Transparent Collective, which is one of the most performant pre-accelerators for people of color and women. And more recently, I'm one of the founding partners and a GP at Black Operator Ventures, known as Black Ops. And we're the first seed fund that is for and by Black founders. So all the GPs are Black founders.
And Neda?
Great. Pleasure being here. First in-person event post-pandemic. So really great to see everyone in person and not be behind a computer. So wanted to start off with that. Neda Amidi, president at Plug and Play. At Plug and Play, we invest in early stage founders and startups. We focus on pre-seed, seed, and Series A. We run corporate innovation platforms with over 500 corporations to facilitate pilots, partnerships between startups and large corporates. And last piece of what we do is infrastructure and real estate. So that was our origin story, really started on the real estate side and continue to do that now across 40 geographies. And I'm personally very passionate about this subject of diversity and equity, and we'll talk more about what we're doing at Plug and Play within it, but really thrilled to be here with everyone on the panel.
Well, thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk with these wonderful people here on the panel for a little bit, and then at the end we'll have time to ask questions. So all you are leaders who are just bringing more diversity and equality to the startup ecosystem, can you really tell me why you think you're seeing the systemic issue of the underfunding with certain entrepreneurs and why this disparity exists? Maybe the top 3 to 5 reasons you think? Who wants to start?
Yeah, I think the number one reason is investment committees. So investment committees are typically the group of people who decide where investment goes. And so if you get a group of people together and they all make a decision about a company, you either need a consensus or not. And so if you have a group of 5 people and one person is asymptomatic for bias or racism and you can't see it, then suddenly that person is going to vote no and you don't know why. And so if you have a group of 5 white males, if you have a group of 4 white males and 1 white female, if you have a group of you name it and you need a consensus, then suddenly you're not going to get it. And that person isn't going to stand up and say I'm biased or I'm racist. They're not going to say that. But what they are going to say is no to that vote, and that person isn't going to get their capital.
I think that's an interesting point of view. And that's a point of view of someone who's obviously has a fund, right? Different funds also have like different voting structures. So sometimes it's not unanimous, sometimes it is. But I think it's an interesting observation because at the core of it, when it comes to that bias, that distance, the thing that I've really realized over the past couple of years and the research I've done is that at the earliest stages, investment is an emotional decision. And so what happens is the person who met you, they might have their own biases, but maybe you're so charismatic, maybe you got your story so well together that you bypass those. You found a human element for them to find a correlation with, so they could begin building empathy and begin to like enjoy you as a person and believe in you as a person, because that's what's going to drive that investment at the earliest stage. But that information cannot transfer on paper to the investment committee, right? So you might have convinced that person. So you feeling so good about that pitch that you had, but not understanding the process of what she's saying, that person cannot transfer that energy to that room. Versus with a typical founder, they can bring that information to the room, and just through seeing the person or going online and watching a video of that person, they can form that level of empathy and connection with that person because they have a more familiar worldview or walk of life. So I think that is at the core of it. And for me, to solve this problem, there has to be ways to get the IC more involved with the actual conversation that happened. Like for us, because everything's virtual now, what is kind of new and maybe a little bit weird is like we record all of our meetings. So it just is what it is. You come as a founder, hey, we're gonna record this. That's cool. And now what's happening is, oh, you don't believe me? Check the video, right? And then you start to see that conversation and energy come through, and you can have some of the same experience I had, and that kind of changes the ball game in terms of how you can connect with somebody.
I'll take the second angle. I had that angle as well in terms of the people making the decision. It really stems, from there, and having that diversity in the IC kind of translates to the rest of the organization and the decision making. But also going even earlier in childhood days. I'm Iranian American. I grew up in Iran, and even in the early days as a child. In Iran in particular, I didn't see much, diversity. And I think even starting at an earlier age, I have a 1.5-year-old now, and some of the cartoons that they have feel and look very different than cartoons that I watched, as a child. There's someone that looks like me. There's many, many different people in the cartoons that one can relate to. So that in and of itself, I see a major improvement even at a very early age. And we haven't gotten to schools yet. That's on my personal to-do list, but I'm sure even in the schools, I didn't go to elementary school in the US, but that also is a place where, just educating and being aware at a very early age will translate into later years as well.
Yeah, I think you're talking about implicit bias, which I think is so prevalent. I saw data that only less than 5% of VCs have female partners. And even in Europe, it was worse, where 93% of tech investment in Europe goes to companies with no female founders. Yeah. And so when you don't have people that look like you or think like you, there is that always, even if there's not a real bias, there's that implicit bias. And I think, James, you and I even talked about the other day, even in the type of companies being built by diverse entrepreneurs might be affecting how they are accepted or they can relate to it.
Yeah, I think that becomes a part of it too. I mean, again, like I'm not going to put I'm not going to put everything on the investor. I mean, there's a couple of things as founders that we could be doing. Oftentimes, like the sectors that we work in, our motivations for building are very different. You'll find that white male founders are often doing this to assert some dominance or to show that they can achieve, versus people of color are doing it for motivations that are about their community or some sort of impact with a certain set of people that they have, right? And that's fine to do. You can make a big impact in the community and change the world and make $1 billion. Those things are not mutually exclusive. The thing that happens is the conversation becomes focused around the impact and that passion. That passion is important to exhibit, but this is really about making money. So then it becomes a storytelling thing. And it becomes like, how can you open the aperture of that conversation as to how it impacts this community that inspire you to do it to greater than that in the US or to globe, like globally. So like, how do you make that big enough so that it can be that big of a venture backable idea? And so not limiting yourself, right? I mean, I'm going through a lot of things here. I don't want to take all the steam, but like, don't limit yourself in the scope of what it could be based on the money you think you could get. It's always got to be as big as it could be. Otherwise, there's no way the other person's going to see it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, that was going to go to you. It's say, we hear about women always doing more things with their community, and if the people who are the VCs can't relate to that, how are you seeing that playing out in the work you're doing?
Yeah, so years ago, James attended an
Numi,
accelerator called Numi Accelerator. Our group acquired that a few years ago. And the programming started as residential programming. You'd all live in a house and you'd talk through all of the things you need to understand when you were building a venture backable company. So we still teach those things today through our now Lightship Bootcamp. And we bring everyone in a house. Well, now since it's COVID, we're in a hotel space. But we typically brought everyone in a house and we ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. We broke down every single barrier around venture, helped people understand like what were they pitching, right? And so we've met a lot of founders who want to add some sort of social impact thing. Like I'm growing this and I want to do the TOMS model. That's great. But not all venture investors want to hear that. They want to know how they're going to get their money back. And so we teach them the language of VC, right? And so that they better understand maybe their network doesn't support the language of VC. Mm-hmm. And so we're teaching them those new things, both women and men.
Interesting. Neda?
Yeah, no, I was reflecting on some of the stats as well around venture funding for female founders, which I was astonished when we saw this, that 2% of venture funding in 2021 went to female founders. And it just seems like a very small number. And I've met so many female founders, and whether it be healthcare or in other industries that, you know, we focus across. And, you know, specifically around in the venture community, I've surrounded myself in the ecosystem that we're in. There are a number of female VCs, and creating that network and that group that we can talk about some of these challenges and also create more opportunity for folks amongst our teams, I think also has a big impact on having and seeing that diversity.
Yeah, you know, I was reading that, you know, it's, you know, 2%, 2.3% for women in 2020, which is the lowest since 2021, since the lowest since 2016. And, you know, women of color actually receive less than 1%. So it's even lower. But what I was amazed to find out, there wasn't a lot of good data on men of color. So we seem to find good data, decent data on women, but not on men. And so, you know, is that a whole segment of the population we're missing as we're learning on this, and how do we think about that? Which I thought was fascinating. So what do you think the biggest challenge, you know, so we talk about the challenges of startups. Is it just funding, or how do we, as you talked about, Neda, like, you know, start breaking down some of this unknown bias, this implicit bias?
Yeah, for founders.
Mm-hmm. For funders and founders, and giving them the support they need, I guess.
Yeah, I think specifically around founders, you know, there's several questions. I was reflecting on the question around, could you repeat the question?
Well, you talked about implicit bias.
Yeah.
Are there things that you're doing in the work you're doing to help eliminate some of that implicit bias for founders?
Yeah, I think specifically within, you know, within Plug and Play, we're really focused through different groups that, you know, different events and series that we've put together to really showcase different populations. And so we've had a series of diversity related events. We started an event group called Found Her, around female founders, a Latinx group that's around Latin founders, Black founders series that's really focused on, it was a grassroots approach amongst our team where it was created. And I'm proud to say that we do have quite a diverse team, both in terms of gender and ethnicity. And a lot of these groups really started in-house and really started amongst our teams to both feature founders and our corporate network and venture network in the different communities. And, you know, to both create a platform like this where we can get together and speak, but also to fund and pitch and create opportunities for fundraising.
Yeah, I was just going to say, people invest in the people they know, like, and trust. And so, like, how can we break down that barrier? So for us, like, we like to eat with people. And I've mentioned food like multiple times now, but like, I'm about my food. And I think that if you can get investors to sit down with a founder or be in a setting where there's food, appetizers, light on the drinks, I think it can be a pretty amazing experience. because many founders in this particular demographic have an issue with network. And so how can we increase that network and how can we build a greater level of trust? I think that is a great place to start.
It's a really, that's part of the gap. We have a report coming out with P&G that talks about the pitching and networking aspect of it and the places where deals get done and the places where people of color, women aren't, right? A lot of us can be at a conference like this or sector focused conferences where we think we'll find people who are speaking on stage and things of that nature. You can catch them, but you can't catch them in the same moment as when they're golfing or having a happy hour with 10 other investors. It's not going to give you the same connection. So I think what she's saying is super important. And then alluding back to what she was talking about, we have the Latinx thing, we have this thing for Black founders, et cetera. I think at face value, sometimes we think about that that's cool, but what about the everybody group, right? And the reality is that these safe spaces are super important. You don't think about it, but she's going off and trying to work with diverse founders to help them speak the language, achieve and grow, right? But simply by putting those people in a room, and you kind of qualified them before they got there, right? They probably applied or whatever, you know what they're doing, you know the potential of them. You've pre-qualified a bunch of people of color and put them in one room together. Most of those people have not been in a room with people of their same level of talent, maybe ever. And so what happens is it really opens you up to have conversations you wouldn't have before, because there's one thing that happens that I'm not sure if we can change in any short order, but because of where Black people, brown people, and et cetera are at on the totem pole, you are often reserved in how you open up your connections, networks, and information, because when you open it up for someone else, their reputation is now yours. White men do not suffer from that. They can introduce you to anybody they want, and if that person's garbage, they'll be like, oh, cool, don't send me that guy again. But it does not affect that person's standing in the world, versus for women and people of color, it does. So that changes how you leverage your spaces and build network with each other. And so when you can get into these qualified safe spaces, it's like a cheat code to actually network in the same way white men do. Give me everything you got, and then hopefully it works. If it don't work, it didn't work. But we're just not doing that on a natural level because of other systematic barriers in place. So the safe spaces that she's creating and that she's doing and the stuff we do at Transparent Collective is why you probably see some of the top performing people of color coming out of those spaces, because it's some of the limited places where you can have that safe space to actually grow and learn.
I think just touching on as well general challenges right now that entrepreneurs are facing, regardless of where they are. I think we're seeing a lot in the talent acquisition space. I think it's no secret, whether it's the Great Resignation or the hot job market that exists today. Finding the right people has been a big challenge for founders today. Regardless of the topic around diversity, but in general, that has been a big challenge in the past 2 years. And the second area has been around funding. It's been an incredible 2 years when it comes to funding and fundraising. But we're starting to see a bit of a slowdown in that arena, especially with the founders that had raised a lot of money during the pandemic and maybe didn't achieve the milestones that they had set out to achieve. So those are just maybe two areas as well on top of everything else that we're seeing that it has been trending.
Then I'm going to ask for clarification on that, because I think that's a really interesting point. Are you saying that one of the other challenges that some of these founders have, because they don't have the network systems, they're having a hard time growing their company with talent?
Yes.
I never thought about that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think. When you're a Black person, you're building a company, there's probably a high percentage chance you don't want to build your company with all people who do not look like you, right? So your goal is to scale your company with a diverse set of people that fit within the culture you're trying to create. But if you go raise money, even if you got from Andreessen Horowitz can't help you hire 10 Black people, right? They just can't do it. They don't have that pipeline. They don't have the people on hand. So to really allow yourself to scale your company, you have to take a different strategy to acquiring talent. And I think that's a challenge I'm still kind of struggling with myself. I'm at Pilotly. I have to bring on as many recruiters as possible just so I can filter through to get to the few people that I think really fit what we're doing. And that's a challenge. I have a friend who's in Austin, actually, Sterling, who's got this thing. What's this thing called?
I can't remember.
It's like, I want to plug him right now. He got this, he has like this black engineering network thing that's got thousands of like super talented
There's
black
not
engineers.
that many black guys named Sterling, so you're going to be able to find
Yeah,
it.
you can Google Sterling and like black something, it's going to come up. But like he's building.
Gotta love Google.
Yeah, he's building something super significant that's going to hopefully help with some of this pipeline around recruiting, but more of that needs to happen. And then there's one other piece of the puzzle. So once you get the money, right, for so many years, for decades, we've not accessed the money, right? Like I did this Black Founders List thing, like, you know, it needs to be updated. But actually with Jonas here, like about 2 years ago, we found out back in 2020, there was only 330 Black founders who had ever raised venture in the history of time at that time. That number has gone up by at least like 20, 30% in the past 2 years. But so we haven't accessed the money. So now what happens is once you actually get the money, what are you going to do with it? Right? Because we're so used to being capital efficient and looking at the budget and all these things. And something that never dawned upon you is using money as a weapon, right? Like I didn't know what that was about till like 2 years ago, right? And that's what everybody else is doing. That's how you're raising all this money and scaling companies to $1 billion because they're like, what? This person costs $1 million? I don't care. I don't have time to find another one. $1 million goes to you. Like whatever it is, like if that person's the best person to get the thing done, then it must be done. And there's a psychology around that. So I know like a little bit of the work to be done there is once you get the capital, where do you find your mental, first of all, what are you doing for your mental health? Because as people of color, we always need to be working on that so we can be moving in the space, right? Have the right energy. But then how do we change the way we think about money? Because like our financial like mentality is just not, you're literally in line with how this VC stuff works.
Yeah, and to add to that, once you get it, you also still need to communicate with your investors.
Mm-hmm.
So what I see a lot of when in our portfolio, not a lot, but some, is folks will kind of slow down on their monthly reporting, right? And that's the cue right away. Like, oh, I didn't hear from you this month. Oh, I know why, right? Because something's not going right. You don't want to share that. Yeah. So we immediately have to go in and figure out like what's going on. Are you running out of capital and you don't want to share? You don't want to raise any more money? Like suddenly some people are like, what? I'm not in a good place to raise money. Well, you actually do because you need to be hiring more people and you don't have enough time to do this part because you haven't hired enough people. And it becomes this like cycle. Yeah. And then another thing to add to that is getting the money and then raising more money. So we see a lot of founders of color that are raising that pre-seed and seed round and still are having that Series A crunch.
Of course. Yeah.
And so they can't get beyond that hump. So there's several reasons for that. It's that group of people who are investing at the Series A level. And it's also maybe sometimes the founders not hitting their milestones as well. Yeah,
I got to throw a plug in there. That's what I'm supposed to do. So our entire fund is built around that Series A gap that they're speaking of. One of the biggest problems for people of color is you go around, you got all the metrics in the world or whatever, your story's good, you're pitching, I really love what you're doing, you know, I'm definitely in this if you find a lead. There is no lead, right? Like there's like literally a handful of Black people who can write you, or people who are going to write a lead check into a Black company at C stage. And so it was imperative for us to build a fund where we could be the lead. Like we got that $1 million, like we go put it down, and then we want to see you step up with your check because you said you were there. If we got the lead, were you joking around? Because like I got the $1 million, I got the 1.5, I got the 2. Like, what do you want to do? And so what happens is once we do that lead thing, I'm doing all the work in the world to have a bunch of Series A investors as LPs in this fund, so their financial incentives are aligned to do the A rounds in my companies, right? Like I don't want them once we say you're going to do this revenue with this team and this thing by this time. Do you want to talk to the company and we do it? I don't want to hear anything about we're not serious about doing this deal. So I think like I'm trying to take a more ecosystem approach to solving that problem because I've always found that like I know people say they want to be doing X, Y, Z and they want to look at Black founders, but until I can put the money on the table, if I can create a forcing factor, like that's the only way I gotta twist people's arms to do this. And if that's what I gotta do, that's what I do.
Yeah, the nice thing about, and I'm certain this has happened for you, the nice thing about the fund that our first fund that we raised was that a lot of the LPs that went in wanted to co-invest. Mm-hmm. And so we knew right away, right? So like Ida from Gingerbread is here. Like she's one of our LPs and they said immediately, like, this is the profile, like go find us these. I'm certain you are going to invest in them anyway, right? And we've found them great companies to invest in. And so it's just, it's a network effect is what we're building.
Yeah, and you'll find that the other people who you're pitching and things of that nature, their LPs do not care about that, right? So the same network effect doesn't exist, right? The people who are investing into us likely also care about what we care about because our strategy is very clear, right? When you pitch it, it's like, I'm not up here talking about I'm investing in, all this. No, I'm investing in Black founders. If you question that, we can end the conversation. Like that's that, right? So you're finding people who are hopefully aligned with your thesis and your strategy, so then those people also invest in, and that's like an important piece of the puzzle to like solving for, getting the capital in. And I think like the other piece of the puzzle is, like she was saying, people will not go out to say I need more money, or to say I haven't hit the milestone yet, so I can't go do it. And other people aren't thinking that way. They're trying to keep as much money in the pool as possible so the thing doesn't go under. And so we have to kind of like change our mentality around that. And asking for help is like a sign of strength, because you'll need help to do this anyway. So like if you're not asking for help, regularly, you probably won't make it to build $1 billion company, because the people who build $1 billion companies are asking for help literally every day. They're having conversations every day about that stuff.
I'm certain you have more questions you want to ask, but I'm just going to say one last thing.
All good.
I think we also need to realize that when we are talking about these groups of people, we're talking about Black founders and we're talking about everyone else, it all means that these companies are going to have great returns. The work that we do is not about social impact, though it does have a social impact. I am going to be providing my LPs with a fantastic return, market rate or better, right? And so that's what we're doing. So these two things can go together, but it doesn't mean that it's for philanthropic good.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's well documented that women receive million less in funding than men, despite actually performing better than men on average. And I couldn't find the data on Black.
We have the data, remember?
Well, I know, but I
Okay,
sorry.
sorry.
He's like, but I did this whole thing.
So we've been working on a project with James. It's coming soon. It's really exciting. Now, as you work within Plug and Play, you guys work with a lot of different kind of companies. Have you seen the companies you work with have the same challenges as they're trying to grow, and what advice have you been able to give them? And because you guys have had some pretty successful companies.
Definitely. Quick question in the room. Just curious, how many entrepreneurs do we have in the room? Raise of hands.
Oh, nice.
Wow, that's awesome.
How many people on the more corporate side? Venture side? Great. And then
That was weird.
I think, for me, when the question is around advice to founders,
You talked about mentoring earlier. And that's
yeah, I think specifically, to startups and to startup founders, I would give advice that I would give to any founder. Like, I wouldn't give different advice based on ethnicity or race. And I think if we go specifically into like general advice, I think finding the right investors that have the gaps that you have, whether it's on your team when it comes to, product or go to market, or if you're in the healthcare space, something on the healthcare side of things, looking for investors that really help you fill those gaps and also can bring something to the table that you may not have, I think is incredibly valuable, regardless of the industry that you're in. And I think, specifically these days, the power of, LinkedIn and online just outreach, it's pretty amazing who you can connect with, even not going to a conference for the past 2 years. So really using the power of networks and online channels to connect with people and really making that first outreach personal, I think can help any entrepreneur or anyone in any industry. So that would be the advice.
I've always been so surprised by like LinkedIn. Like, if you write a note, usually people will accept your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then, you made the comment on endorsing someone. Like, I've had my last two bosses, one was a woman and one was a man. And my female boss was like, well, I can't accept all these invitations. That means I'm endorsing them. And so we asked my current male boss, what are you doing on LinkedIn? He goes, oh, I just accept them all. And so it's just really like, okay.
Is that what I'm supposed to do?
Yeah.
Because I have like 341 people sitting there right now.
You accepted mine.
I'm
We're good.
nervous. Okay.
What about flip it around? What advice would you give VC funders when they evaluate women, Black or Latinx funders and startups that may or may be different or the same of how they evaluate their white startups? Because you're all in the investment or this growth of business.
I have one note on that. I mean, it's my secret sauce, but I mean, here's the thing. Like, you're going to get some pitches from some people of color. And remember, I told you the passion's going to come out before the scale of the business. It's kind of on you to like really look at that market and that business and whatever traction that they've surfaced to see if that opportunity is bigger than they're saying, because they might not be saying it. So I'm oftentimes putting words in people's mouth and they're like, you're right. You're right. Oh, you're right. And then they show up like 3 months later with like 10 times the revenue. I'm like, here's a check. Right. But I already had that relationship, so it's not going to be competitive for me. I'm just going to write the check and move on. So I think like unsurfacing the things that people aren't saying, because like the communication is just going to be different. So if you look at it like for face value as the like same blurb, same pitch as someone else sent you, you might be selling yourself short. You know, if you see something that looks ridiculous, it's going to be ridiculous. You walk away. But like if someone's literally telling you about this business that's making X amount of dollars, they're making $50,000 a month. And they're like, man, you know, I'll be profitable by 2 years from now. I'll be making $5 million. That sounds not venture backable in a way, right? But if I look into the numbers and what they're doing in the market and who they are, I'll just be like, they just don't know. So then I'm gonna take advantage of this. I'm gonna like help them tell the right story. We'll put the money in this company and it's gonna be what it is. So I think just kind of like having a lens for that, like you can filter through the garbage, like you're gonna know it's garbage, but like don't just throw something away based on like weird, like just like, you know, things like conservative forecasts of revenue and like maybe not having a co-founder, since like 90% of Black people do not have co-founders. That's just like a fact right now, at least. You got to think about the composition of things differently and how they're telling the story and really dig into it. So that's kind of like how I handle it.
I think adding to this, you know, we experienced this yesterday in our investment committee, and without naming the company or what they were doing, the company was in the like female contraceptive space, and they were pitching to, I mean, a group of male VCs, and there was a little bit of an awkward moment where someone had to jump in to like explain, you know, the problem and explain, you know, how it works. And I think, you know, it was very timely as well, given that we had this panel today as well. And I think goes back to the original point of, you know, surrounding yourself by more diversity at the IC level, as well as if you're not familiar with the problem or with what the founder is focusing on, being able to also understand and relate and empathize as an investor, regardless of your own gender, your own ethnicity, is definitely, I think, key as well. Just because whether it's in the healthcare space or in the banking space, being able to relate to others is very key in the empathy piece there.
Before you go, can I make one note? I want to hear your response to this. I was just thinking about this. In telling the story and connecting with people, do we think that, like, I'm usually speaking of Black founders because that's what I study, but do we think that people of color are more product focused? Because like less vision focused, more product focused. Because like if you don't have a product, you don't know how you're going to solve the problem. Do you feel confident enough to go out there and raise $1 million and tell someone some story about how you're going to solve a problem you don't know how to solve? I think there's a certain level of honesty in these communities that might lead people away from like thinking that's dishonest to do that, as opposed to I'm smart enough to solve the problem, so I'm going to try and get this money to solve it and worry about that solution later. Like I'm just thinking, like, are we more product focused? So we get in the pitch and we're talking product. Everybody wants the product, but like that's not what actually converts a lot of investors, right? Because like you got 3 customers, so just because 3 people say it's cool doesn't mean you have product market fit or anything. So if you're hella product focused, is that really a strong enough proof point for me to give you this money? Versus if you're vision focused, maybe I can see that fit into the world. I don't know. It's just a thought.
I think I see a little bit of both, but I absolutely see where you're coming from. I think that some folks go and try to raise money at that ideation stage, and people are like, no. And eventually people just go home, do the work,
Right.
you know, generate revenue, and then go back out, right? So you know, we have a company in our portfolio that tried really hard, couldn't find anyone to invest, and got to like $3 or $4 million of revenue a year, and then went out and started raising. And we're like, what? Like,
Right.
you know, and people are really confused by it. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it really leans more heavily to what you're saying.
Okay.
With the work we do, when we meet with founders, we often we do dig. Like we dig. Often they'll always come to us and say we need money, and we sit there and say, okay, what do you need money for? Like really getting deep. Is it really money you need? Do you need mentoring? Do you need people? Do you need money to fund those people? But the money isn't going to be enough to solve the problem. And I think, I think that's what we've learned as we've started doing this on this journey is that peeling the onion, digging deep. What do you really need? But we do mostly find that they do need product. I mean, we talked to a founder a couple weeks ago, and she said, I heard 300 no's before she heard her first yes. And she's raised in the double digits in the millions, right? Now that she's on her way and doing amazing. And it's that tenacity and just really continuing to refine the pitch and figuring out what the different VCs want. But I do think making sure, what I'm hearing though, both from James and Neda, is on the VC or the funder side, making sure you have the right people doing the little extra work, making sure you understand their market, making sure that you have knowledge of the work and the space they want to play in, or having someone in the room that does.
I think one of the questions was what gets you as an investor to say yes, to an investment.
Mm-hmm.
And we touched upon it a little bit, but I think that it always for us goes back to the team. We're investing many times at pre-seed predominantly. An idea can change. You can pivot if you're coachable and go in a different direction. So for us, we really invest in the teams, and the first 5 minutes really count, in the pitch, especially when you're on Zoom. You have to make sure you captivate the other person, whether it's through empathy or connecting with them as a person. But really getting them those first 5 minutes is key, and staying engaged. I think, some founders are really good at being able to detect when they've lost you and bringing you back. So I think that was a skill set as well, that it became maybe a little bit harder to gauge that, based on a virtual setting versus in person with your body language. But that has been something that I would say I'd give that advice to founders to, try to see and keep the investor engaged in those first 5 minutes.
Yeah, and we do invest in teams. We also really focus on the founder, as James was saying. And so when it is a solo founder, we focus on whether or not they can hire a team, right? Can they do a good job of attracting more talent? Because they may not have that technical co-founder or whatever it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you a solo founder because you can't work with people? Or are you a solo founder because you're not around people who can take the risk to start, be at a company with no money, right? The latter is the ideal. That's fine. If you can hustle it up and build something because you don't have people around you who could jump off and just do it, that's cool. But yeah, if you solo because, you think you're end all be all and you can do it all yourself, then you're not going to build $1 billion company. You can build a great company. You can become a multimillionaire. But you're not going to IPO a company. It's not happening that way. I talked to a woman this morning. She was there with me, and she's I don't know, the only word I can describe her is gangster. That's literally from Queens, hustler. That's what she does. She comes off that way in communication just because that's where she comes from. I can see her. I love her, but other people might not quite understand her mode of communication. And she's a solo founder. So if you meet her, you're gonna make the assumption that she can't work with people just based on how she moves. But she built a company that makes $16 million in revenue. And I was like, hey, how are we gonna go to the next level? And she was like, I can't take this to the next level. And to say that and be a hustler who literally is self-made, wealthy woman from nothing is she really knows what's going on. She's really coachable. I'm like, we're gonna build a board for you. We're gonna raise the beast. She's like, I'm with it. Send the stuff we're doing. It was a 10-minute conversation. No convincing to be had. She literally talked herself into it. She was like, I don't want this. I don't want people I got to hire. I don't got money for that right now. I was like, no, we talking about that. We're going to bring in CEO of this, CEO of that. Boom, boom. She's like, all right, let's do it. Hit me. Done. If that's the communication you can have with someone, that person's going to win.
But James, do you think that what I think is coachable and what you think is coachable, what she thinks is coachable are all different?
I don't know.
Because I've had people come to me and be like, you know what? That founder's not coachable. What does that mean?
So for me, it means so today I asked her, I was like, what do you think it takes to go to the next level, right? And she told me I know it's a different skill set, this, and this. When I go do a Series B, I'm going to build out a board. I'm going to do this, and that. And I was like, I think we should do it now. This is why, blah, 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 blah. And she was like, I'm with that. She was 100% in that, yep. Right? But she changed her conviction within 5 minutes because I explained to her what it was. And she wasn't stuck on, no, I'm only going to do it then. Mm-hmm. She was like...
And she may have been okay with saying, you know what? No, but this is why.
Right.
Right.
And she'd been cool with that. And I would have been like, all right, cool. Well, I know what's up. we'll make a decision based on that, and I'm still gonna help you wherever you need, right? Yeah. So like, and she'll do that sometimes. Sometimes she'll be like, no, that's not what I'm thinking because I already experimented, I already thought, so I'm gonna do this. But like, if you bring her the information, she's gonna process it. She's not gonna fight you on it until she can understand it, right? So
we have so many founders in the room. So what do you think the essential skill sets is for a founder?
I think we covered it a lot throughout. I would say one thing that I would say a founder's role beyond being good on the people skills is selling. Like you're selling your vision to teammates that you're onboarding, you're selling your vision to the investors, you're selling to get customers on board. And so really having that conviction and having that drive to be able to sell is key kind of all across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be resilient. Like
you didn't know the words.
I took your words.
You didn't know the words.
All the words. Yeah, you definitely have to be resilient. Like those 300 no's are not easy. Like getting kicked in the teeth is really rough. You got to get up every morning because you have people you need to feed. Yeah. So definitely being resilient is it.
All right, so we hit conviction, we hit resilience.
Knowing your opportunities, I think is another one that we keep on hitting on. It's like you talked about, your founder says, I don't have the skill set to take the next level. And you said you need to hire a CEO.
So
I know I've met so many founders that are so successful because they know when that's not what they do great.
So that to me, that falls into the coachability category a little bit, right? It's somewhere between like knowing what you know and being coachable to get to that point of like changing your mind. So you have conviction, resilience, coachability, and
selling, communication.
And you say, so selling. So then there's like one more aspect to this.
People skills.
This is going to be a great blog post.
there's one more access to this. Like, so like, you can make it through. You know something. Here's the thing. You know something that someone doesn't. Mm-hmm. I think like the vision, the unique insight that you have into the thing that you're doing, that's like the last piece of the puzzle. Like if you're a person who's resilient, convicted, and coachable, you're ready to do something. But what is something that you're going to do that's so differentiated that's going to be like this magnificent thing that no one else did? So I think like knowing something that no one else really knows is like a key piece. Like for me with Pilotly, I was like, no one really knows how TV shows are tested, and if they knew, they would change this process because it's literally trash. Like so, but then the key part was like, how do you sell to these people? What is the conversation you have with them? Because if you go to Hollywood and tell them they're trash, they will throw you out because they make $1 trillion globally, right? So what's wrong with the process that's making me this money, right? The conversation just becomes, if you come with the right conversation, which is my kind of trade secret, you can walk in the door and they'll walk you into the next door and sell the product. But that was like something I knew. I spent so much time in the market. It's something I knew about that space that no one else knew that would allow me to do what I was doing. So I feel like that's an important piece of the puzzle with the founder.
I have a question for the group too around pitch decks. What's important for you in a pitch deck? Or is a pitch deck important to you? Oh,
you know what? I messed someone up the other day. They came in, they said, oh, okay, cool. We're going to come in and introduce ourselves. We're going to run through the deck for 15 minutes. This is now. It's like, we can't do that. I just want to know where you're from and why you're doing this. And he was just messed up. That didn't go well for him. Like, but like no one wants to walk through a pitch deck with you like for 15 minutes in a pitch meeting. Because again, you're trying to make an emotional connection with someone. And so like the deck is good to send ahead of time. The deck is good to reference if there's something visual I need to see. But really we're trying to see like, can you sell me on this? Because the deck ain't selling me. Like even when I'm selling my product to people, like I don't want to walk through the deck for half the 20-minute meeting. I want to like walk through it for maybe like 7 minutes, and they came in there for that. It's a sales meeting. But after that, I'm building relationship and trust and conversion, right? So like, I think it's got to be a human connection. So like pitch decks to me, like, I mean, obviously there can't be paragraphs in it. I don't want to see like paragraphs in like 10 of these things. I don't want to see it. Like, I don't want to see the paragraphs. I want to see some visuals. You want to see how big the market is. You want to see who the team is. But like, just what is the product? Like, what can I see the product? Like, because you're not gonna be able to show me the product in a conversation. Can I see that? Can I see how big the opportunity is? And I'm gonna talk to you. Like, if I think it's cool,
Yeah, for me, I'm really just trying to see, how big the market is, and it doesn't need to be on that weird TAM-SAM situation. Like, I don't need that at all.
Yeah.
That's super important. Who the team is at the time, that's important. Logos are helpful for me just to remember.
Yeah.
I don't care if you've gotten any awards. Yeah, 30 under 30. Like that's just
Gotcha.
like you wasted your time throwing that up there. I didn't need to see it. But and then financials, like if you've already made money, but I don't need to see that you think you're going to make $10 million in 3 years, like because I know that you're probably wrong. But yeah, it's more about what I don't want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even say like the financials, like depending on who you're talking to, you can do it. But like when you give people financials, you're giving them tools to build a box. Like you're giving them something to grab onto, right? If I just tell you, look, man, I'm making the next microphone. You can't see it. It's going to float and it's going to change the world because then you can speak at amplitude at any place you are in the world. Like that sounds cool. Like, how, do you have the technology to build that? Like, it might cost $1,000 a unit. I can only sell for $500, but you don't know that yet, right? So like, before you know the margins and all those things, like once you get those things, they'll be like, well, you can only sell 1,000 of these things. Only 1,000 people want to talk that loud in so many places, right? Well, now it's not a venture backable company, right? But if I don't give you those unit economics, all you know is the vision of how big it could be, right? So sometimes, like depending on where you're at, how impressive the financials are, like you might even want to hold that until like they start talking about it. Like that's just sometimes how it works.
Neda, how about you?
I think echoing as well. I think for me, both my interviewing style as well as hearing the pitches shifted a bit during the pandemic. So it shifted more towards getting to know people and trying to connect online. So my biggest question initially is, who are you? Like, what's your story? And trying to understand it from that perspective, from a founder or someone that we're interviewing as a candidate. And then, for me, still going into the pitch deck is helpful, especially having a visual on the screen to be able to follow. But maximum 10 slides, that's very key for me, like in terms of the amount of content, echoing, the awards, and really just making it super clear, what the problem is, what's the solution, and why are you the right team to be doing this.
So I know we're running out of time, and I know I could talk forever and on this. This is amazing. So I'm going to ask each one of our panelists one more question and just give one sentence or just a couple words on what you think. And then I'm going to open it up to the audience here to ask questions because I see people getting very antsy. Let me start with you. What do you think, what is the one thing we can do to better inspire a movement to improve equity among underserved founders?
You just don't give up. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
I'm just gonna say, be intentionally have intention with your empathy. I mean, have intentionally see people where they're at and try to understand who they are, and that'll help things move forward.
Surround yourself by diverse people.
Wonderful.
And I love the snaps. I love it. I wish you could hear it on Zoom.
Well, this was a magnificent opportunity, and I want to thank our wonderful panelists here, but I want to open it up to the audience. Does anybody have any questions? I don't think we have a mic, so I'm going to repeat your questions. Oh, we do have a mic.
Oh, cool.
All right.
Hi, great talk, everybody. Question for you. You mentioned the committees. What advice, what tips, what strategies can you share so that we can maybe influence the committees as well? Play some sort of role in that and influencing the committees post your pitch.
That's a great question. So, like you said, every fund is a little bit different about how it's structured. I think on the founder side, I think you ask, how's your committee set up? And knowing who was on an investment committee. So I like to know how the vote goes, right? Who else is going to be making this decision? So I think that's helpful to know. I think that LPs can swing this in the right direction. So if they're making investments, they should know who is on those investment committees. And who sets up an investment committee are the people who are actually making investments. So GPs, managing partners, those are the people. So how do we make the change? We invest in more GPs of color and women GPs and gay GPs so that there are more people making the decisions. So I think that at the core is the answer.
I'm going to chime in with a little quick definition just in case. Because some people are going to be like,
what's that?
These are just rich people who give out money. Those people ain't got, no. Like, they're getting paid a lot, though. Don't get it twisted. These guys are making too much money to make bad decisions. But their LPs are the people, limited partners, the people who put the money in the fund. So, find the people that influence the money that they're distributing, and they ain't got a choice, right? At that point, the LPs, I heard this great company's great. I think we should really be in that. Well, then the decision is made, right? Because LP is the one that puts the fuel in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, just to double click on that, like an LP could be a teacher's pension fund, right? And so they could be investing in something really random. Like I think, there's a person in the audience and I were talking the other day about like their teachers' pension funds who are in Russian companies, right? And so know who your pension fund is investing in and read the reports as they come and see who they're putting money in. There are universities doing the same thing. So find out who they're investing in, or else we're all going to be stuck in the same situation.
Thank you. Is there a question behind you?
Hi, my name is Carrie Schrader, and I am the co-founder of Mixtrose, a SaaS platform that I co-founded with my daughter.
You sure did.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. That brings together, it allows leaders to make impactful connections, collect data, and build community in real time, live, virtual, and as a hybrid. My question is for James. Can we talk for 20 minutes?
Boom.
Sure.
I told these guys
What am I gonna
the
say,
biggest
no?
meetings happen. Like as soon as this ends, they'll be attacked.
If you're a black guy,
There's
here.
people on the other side,
Not,
too.
no hate for anybody else, but just saying. Can't say no, otherwise it's not on brand.
Hey there, my name is Chris Smith. I'm an entrepreneur here in Austin area, early stage. So the point you made about or a lot of founders of color being solo founders, but you want to see that they can hire people and build a team. What are some of the things that you look for to show that they can hire a team if they haven't necessarily hired one? I mean, I flipped 3 homes, so I hire and fire contractors, and I have successful exits.
That's the
times in
thing.
a row. But
Yeah.
are there other things?
No, but that's the thing. Like, if you can't, I'm a contractor. Like, I know how to build teams. I know how to get people working. I know how to motivate them. But like, even verbalizing that, right? Because that doesn't happen in the pitch. They come in like, hey, I'm the founder. And they try and show a couple contractors. And they ain't talking about like how they've built teams and how they work with people and how excited they are to hire these 3 people. Like that doesn't come up in conversation sometimes. And then like, you have to kind of suss it out. If you come in there knowing that you're solo, but knowing like you have the skill set to build a team, that should be expressed.
Great. Just some on this.
Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Jessica Bussard. I'm the founder of Wave Therapeutics. We've created the first smart cushioning technology to prevent bed sores.
Okay.
Candice, what you said earlier, about having that piece of the pie, I find it impactful because I'm also an out proud transgender woman. And I walk into the room and, I know that my piece of the pie is a really teeny piece of the pie and that there's 17 people out there that want to ding me just because of who I am and my identity. How can I overcome that? I mean, if being a woman gets me only 2.6% of the big VC pie, and being trans only gets me 2.6% of that pie, that's not a big, very pie. And I'm trying to save 60,000 lives each and every year.
Well, that's your piece of the pie.
Yeah.
Your piece of the pie is bed sores and is a huge problem, right? And so you're selling that. And you are also to be loud and proud about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, and
Amen.
I think that, unfortunately for quite some time, it's been such a challenge for everybody, pretty much everybody in this room to do this type of stuff. And I think now, like, it is still a challenge, but the doors are much wider open than 10 years ago when I was really diving into this for the first time. Like, and so I think like we have to forget about what the challenge has been and what the percentage is, and like talk that vision and blow people's minds with what, you can get in the room now. Before, you might not be able to get in the room. So it's like, you got to come in that room and spit that vision and forget about the 1% because maybe, I mean, I'm going to say, I don't know you. You said one thing. I'm like, you're sure about this vision. You're sure about this thing. You're in that top 1% of the 100%. So that puts you within that, even if that's a small pie, that puts you in that small pie, and that small pie will keep growing. Right. Like, so I just think like, you got to forget about that and be like, you're the best. So it doesn't matter if only 1% gets it. I'm in that 1%. It's a fact. You know what I mean? So it's like, you got to believe that goes back to what she was saying about really being convicted about like, yo, I'm going to win this.
And focusing on the healthcare investments, the billions that were invested in healthcare and bed sores in particular is a big pain point. So I think definitely focusing in on that and really selling that as your story is huge. It's a huge market and huge opportunity.
Well, thank you all for that. I appreciate it. So if anybody wants to talk about that little piece of the pie, I'm here. And I'm also pitching tonight at the Gans Pepper Pitch Contest at 5 o'clock.
All right, we'll
So
see you
love to have you there. Thanks.
there. Any more questions? Behind you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Tahira. I am two-time founder, going into my second venture of a marketing advertising company, and now launching a SaaS platform to solve some of the supply chain issues that we have in the agency and marketing business. So my question for you guys is actually, what are your thoughts on second founders or founders that may be straddling two businesses, kind of running one startup and also looking to launch a second and fundraising for that one?
It's a great question. I think it's hard to do both. I would, depending on the role that you have in each company, if you're CEO and founder of one, I make it, having a startup is like having a baby, and it's like having a newborn baby, I would say, especially in the early stages. So it's although you can have twins and you can have multiple babies, like still focusing on the one and giving it your all, and maybe finding someone else that can take on the other one, or finding an exit plan, or merging them together if there's ways to do that. I find it really hard to be able to be the CEO and founder of two startups at the same time.
So I run two companies right now. So I'm the CEO of my foundation. I have a fund. You just have to be a remarkable person.
I think I am.
Yeah.
I also have great co-founders in both businesses,
Yeah.
so it's not just me.
You just have to manage your expectations for what types of investors are going to want to invest in someone who is, has risk on two sides. I think it's possible. It is very difficult, though.
Yeah,
to your
I'm
point.
going to say she's in a very unique situation. She spent a lot of time doing what she's doing, and she has a counterpart who spent a lot of time doing what he's doing, and in combination, it's a very different situation. I run a company, right, and I have Transparent Collective, which doesn't take up much of my time. But in going to raise a fund, it was like, well, how much time do you spend on Pilot? How much time do you spend on this? Now, I know that running a fund is easier than running Pilot. I know that for a fact. But that's not as easier said than done, right? And so for us, it was imperative to build a full-time team that people could have confidence in, because I found that running a fund part-time was the equivalent of someone showing up and pitching a company where they're the part-time CEO. And once I connected those dots, I was like, well, we'll solve for that problem. So I think what she's saying kind of makes sense. But think about it this way. This is crazy, but think about it this way. You have this thing over here, and now you have this new idea. You're like, this could be huge, right? I really want to do this, right? If this thing can be huge, then this thing doesn't matter. That's the way a VC is looking at it, right? If this is $1 billion opportunity, what do you need $1 million for? You know what I'm saying? That's not the thing. So you can wrap it together and do what you're going to do. But if this is the coolest thing ever, you're trying to convince me it's the future of the world in some way, you can't tell me that there's something else that can be taking up your time. It's not possible, right? For me, running my company is of complete benefit to people who I invest in my fund. When someone calls me and asks me, how do I hire? How do I do this? I did it yesterday. So I can do this good, right? Because I'm literally doing it on the ground with you right now. But if I'm doing two different things, I know it's marketing, I know it's got the thing and the solutions with the marketing, but just think about it that way.
What about Jack and Elon?
I know.
That's who I think about.
That's what I say too. That's what I say too, man. But Elon does a lot of, I don't know. I'm on camera. I'm not gonna say a lot of stuff. But I'm just saying. I live a pretty healthy and clean life. So I don't know if I could pull off the 24-hour a day workout of Elon. I don't think I'll pull it off.
I think we've got time for one more question. And then I know you guys were going to attack these guys at the end. So.
Last question, very quickly. I'm CJ Edwards here from Indianapolis. I am at ground zero with building my business. I'm a mom of 3 and a wife, and currently working full-time and looking to leave this full-time position to pursue my company as my full-time thing. Luckily, I have a husband that backs my family 1,000%. But what advice do you have to the entrepreneurs that are at ground zero? And I'm not building or selling a product. I'm building and working on retreats, conferences, an author, experiences, things that are going to change people's lives. So it's not necessarily something tangible. I'm planning and have signed the contract for the first conference this November in Belize. So this isn't necessarily a microphone. I can't show you a blueprint, but I can tell you who I am and why I qualify to do what I'm doing. So for those of us that are more in the human capital side versus a product, what advice do you have for us?
Yeah, I'll start real quick. So I think you can do a lot of things between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So before you leave your job, make certain you really love it. So spend that time that you had been watching Netflix and work on the business then. Save some money. I know your spouse has it, but coming from someone who is on their second marriage, I will say right now, like, reassess everything, talk to your children and talk to your spouse about whether or not this is actually going to work. Because once you're not going to work, it really does change things. So I would just make certain that you are really, really strong in what you plan on doing before you just go out and leave, and figure out how close you can get to revenue so you are not potentially a burden.
Yeah, I was going to say one way I only work like 2 jobs, but like the 2 times I quit a job, I went out and got like an unsecured loan for like 15, 20 grand, just to have extra money around. Because, supposedly what I'm doing is going to work, I'll just pay it back. You know what I'm saying? And those unsecured loans you can do over like 20 years or 15 years or something. It's like a small amount of money, right? So at first I'm giving semi-poor financial advice, but it's just what you have to do depending on how you don't have money, right? I'm paying back the loan with the loan, but I got the money, right? And then it gets paid off, right? Like that's enough runway for me at that time to really make it work, and then it gets paid off, and then boom, and then your credit's really good. So when you need to go do something else, get your credit up. So that's just however much capital you can have accessible to you is good, and like finding that anchor and like even the small amount of revenue that you can access will like really help you out, and even your self-esteem, because you want to feel like you're really doing it. You don't want to be out here not making no money for like 6 months and not feeling like you're doing it, because depending on your personality, it could be downward spiral. For me, that shit like puts me in the corner. I go up. Some people go down. It just depends on who you are. So you really want to know who you are when you go off and do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, don't be afraid of leveraging credit. That's all this venture capital stuff is anyway. So like, don't be afraid of that. I think that many times as Black people, we don't always know how to make that work because we weren't raised that way. And so you just have to figure out how to make it work for you. So find someone who has, in your mind, made it, and maybe start having those conversations with them. We didn't always have conversations at my dinner table about money. We have them now at our house, but find that group of people you can talk to about that.
I would suggest testing it and piloting it too, if there's a way. Based on what you presented, I believe there's a huge market, especially post-pandemic. I say everything is about an experience, and especially around food. I think a lot of our get-togethers during the pandemic have been with our patio lunch series and getting together for lunch. So I would do a small pilot and try to test it out before you jump, fully into it. But it is, everyone is coming back together around experiences. And I think if you, test it out and make sure it's, as Candice said, the right move, that would be a good first step.
So unfortunately, we're going to have to bring this to a close. I know that I could sat here for another several hours listening to this. I really want to thank Candice, James, and Neda for their wisdom and their skill and all they're doing in this environment. Once again, I'm Lauren Thaman. If you have a consumer product, fast-moving consumer good, I would love to talk to you. But thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us here today. Thank you. Thank you.